place where, you know, it's conducive for learning. And that really needs to be addressed in this situation. I've heard quite a bit about coach and
Wait, are you saying original or scaled down?
scale down. Scale down.
Then you said something different, you're gonna do.
I would say
That
that
sounds like original.
because we're focusing on the classroom spaces specifically at the lower level
Okay.
for air conditioning. This is the least amount of recognition because we're going to replace the outdated heating, but also provide the AC relief that's been the forefront for many years.
Oh, I agree with the middle school, high school completely. My question was just, do we want to wait on the roof coating or not? That's all I.
And what is it, just for clarification, is it scaled back version or the original? Yes.
I think Mrs. Young is talking about the scaled back version of the middle school, high school.
Well,
Her question is, should we scale back ACES? I think that's.
it is, however, I understand that we have everything now, but not the roof. That feels good. I understand.
It certainly would, to Tom's point, put everything out there that we've intended towards building a project and put that out in place. So that's what it would do.
Okay, so we'd like to get it scaled down.
Nick, you go with the scale down?
Yeah, I'm for whatever HR goes, warm, safe, and dry. And if this is the question is more responsible way to do so, then I'm fine with it.
So we're waiting on the roofing? Is that what we're all saying?
I think so.
Yeah, so I was just like I said, we pushed up this roofing time frame because of the agreement. So this would have always come back around the first look at 27, 28 on the capital projects for that FP&S committee to recommend. So that would be my suggestion is to pause on that, to save that, I think it was about 1.2 million.
Yes, let's look through.
To a future time that says, if there's a grant available, we could. If not, we're going to look at it 2-3 years down the road and says, now we have funding, or how we're going to, kind of time frame.
Just keeps it on the 10-year plan.
Yes, it won't, all these items were on the 10-year plan. They just got, some of them got escalated, just like the roof got escalated quicker due to the grant. Because we didn't want to miss the opportunity to submit it. And then, in this case, we got awarded, and then we would be kicking ourselves that we didn't submit everything we could. So we maximized as much as we could to submit.
And you're sure you could submit again, the same item?
Yes, we could, because we would basically, we would wipe it off the grant. We're going to be able to resubmit it, because we did not complete the work.
So should the grant opportunity come up again, we could include the roofing as part of that.
Good.
So I'll provide this exact slide for discussion on the work session, and then if it's all in agreement from the full board, we'll create an official document to approve. If that's okay. All right, so we're going to pivot into some historical data here at the district. We're going to focus on total revenues and total expenditures. So the graph you see here, the blue is budgets, at total budgets, and the red is actuals. So you can see the percentage that I have on each of those is the difference between the budget to actual at the year end. So from 2015 to 2024, you can see we were hanging around that 3% mark until we had, just like everything else, I've been showing an anomaly year in 23 and 24. So I'll have in a later slide that breaks down those two anomaly years as a revenue standpoint, but this is just historically. I know a lot of the members haven't seen some of this historical data yet, so this is just my opportunity to bring that forward with the audit and AFR now kind of complete, to bring that up this week. So that's just the note there that shows where we always compare ourselves to our budget when we do the budget a year ahead of time. So we'll jump into some data. So I'll just pinpoint some specific data that kind of points out some items. You guys can look at that at a later date if you want to kind of dive into it deeper. So the biggest thing to note is you can see for this specific year in 2021, if you look at the 7100s for basic ed, and you can see me highlighting here, that one there was a hold harmless year. You always hear us say hold harmless from a basic or from a funding standpoint on the state. That was the first year they actually implemented that, and that's why you can see 100% because they did not raise. I mean, they raised a tiny bit from the prior year, but they did not raise, and they pulled that hold harmless clause, and they gave us the exact same amount, and that was because of the uncertainty of COVID at that time. But that was the only time they've done that in the most recent time frame. And you can see everything else is kind of just mixed and matched of over or under from what estimations were, other than obviously ESSER funding down here in the 8,000s and 8,700. And the 21-22, very similar. You can see that we got some extra money through COVID, just everything can be funneled out through state, and then through federal levels. You can see just kind of that mix and match growth in those subcategories there in the bottom. So we'll jump into the most recent 2 years, and the highlighted ones you can see are some of the anomalies that we could not predict when we approved a budget June prior and looking back from the June after. So in the taxes, the big tipping point is our earned income tax. And earned income tax flows off of local wages. We can't control local wages. As wages go up, so does the tax revenue we get in accordance with it. So we can't predict that. We try to predict it, but we can't. So sometimes they outpace what our predictions are. And then investment earnings, if everybody remembers, the Fed raised their rates rapidly in a short time frame, and we were actually a recipient of that increase in interest. Yeah, so the first year we were getting, I think, 0.01% in interest, and hence we only budgeted 5,000, which then jumped, I think at the time, somewhere in the 3 to 4 range, and then peaked in 23-24 at about just under 6%. So you can see that wild growth in investment earnings, which we could not anticipate. We don't have any control over the federal policy on that, but we did get, an added benefit from being a healthy fund balance for the project.
Yeah, that looks really great.
Yeah. So some of the other things are the state. They've been very focused on education, especially in the past 2 years, and this most recent year, the funding lawsuits. So they have an eye on education and education funding as a whole. So we've been seeing some upticks, and we never know how much that uptick's going to be until they tell us, which is always after we have to have it through. So we can't responsibly budget that ahead of time. So that's where you can see some of that. And then this year will be the last year of the federal stimulus. It would be the rundown here. ESSER money, we have used them all and closed out those accounts, so those will be no longer moving forward. So I'm going to dive into just the 6,000 local revenues for 22, 23, and 23, 24 to kind of show what I just talked about of growth. So specifically the EIT, so earned income tax, we had 4.4 budgeted, we ended at 5.2. We can't really predict that it's going to jump maybe 19% higher than we predicted. The same thing with interest, we can't predict that. What we do for budgeting is we have 3 years of actuals and the most current budget year to date, and that's what we use to estimate where we're going to end up. So we use the historical trend. If we get something outside of that trend, that's where you see this. So you can see those differences just in those 5 accounts alone. Over budget with 1.7 million for those past 2 years. And we can't predict that's going to happen ever.
Right. I mean, it could go the other way.
Correct. So that's where the kind of the difference between revenues and budget, or actuals and budget comes in, and why we've seen the surplus the past 2 years. Is in particular, the revenue side, getting more revenues than we could budget.
So this is tailoring the COVID money, tailoring all the grants.
And we also had a big change here where we approved the project. We're looking at, we're doing a lot of stuff here at the district that we can't see until we're looking in the rearview mirror. So some of those budgets are going to change going forward as the project. We're going to go from 3 buildings down to 2. To anticipate that is going to be hard. We're going to do our best to get as close as possible, but there's going to be a year of just shifting until we can settle in and say this is our new quote unquote normal just budgetary limit. It's a huge change just going from 3 buildings down to 2. So we're gonna be doing that this year, somewhat in anticipation of moving into the new building at maybe in the later half of the year, and then definitely in 26, 27. That'll be another hard look at the budget. So that's something we work here administratively before we bring it to the board, that we vetted all that and researched all that.
So we're definitely gonna save a lot of money on the whole schools around in there, but we're still gonna have to keep the water and electricity and all that.
So we can't put a number on that until we've got to that point. So that's where some of those we have to guess, more or less, as a budget to say, we think it's gonna be here based on the historical. So that's just revenue. Any questions on the revenue side? So some of it was just, the committee hasn't really seen this aspect of it. We kind of go through briefly as the members kind of want that. So the expense side is the opposite. You can see here's the exact same graph for the exact same time during 2015 until now. And expenses, you can see we were running at about 3%, 2 to 3% below budget. We always say we budget for the worst case scenario, but then we look, just like the prime example was the bus. We had 140,000, when we went out to bid, came in a lot less, we saved 25,000. That adds up to 2 to 3% across all accounts for the whole year. So we're going to dive into that, but the expense side we're more or less the same across because we had some revenues from ESSERs to kind of supplement those expenses. So just to highlight here, you can just see that we have some that are over, some that are under, based off of just nuances throughout the year. So there's really not a huge stick out point in any of the expenses that we can note in any of the years, but you can just see that we save on as much as we can, and when we can't, we just transfer that. That's where the board has to you as a budget transfer when we transfer. So, and then you see at the end we have that 2%, 2% kind of stagnant that we kind of try to hold.
There's some accounts that we actually end up being more expensive.
Yeah, correct. So like we can't anticipate if we bought something and it'll be more expensive. How the budgeting works here is if another account came under, you would transfer that and the board approves that transfer if it triggers the transfer protocol. So there's some, I won't get into the fine details of that, but whenever we have to, that has to be board approved. So they come through as we review those. And then the same thing, and a lot of these is, like I said, was ESSER funding like sprinkled throughout these accounts that we could supplement some of that, especially like the level up clinic, some of these accounts. So like we looked at the historical trend, you can see that we jumped in those ESSER years in like flat budgeted and flat expenses, just with that combination. So any questions on like the expense or just revenue or budget actuals from the finance committee? That pretty much wraps it up. We'll just briefly go over the change orders. We had 3 minor change orders, and then we had the one that was just approved by the board for that. It was a firewall. And we're still we're at about 20% of our total contingency estimate. And then just briefly go to timeline, like I said, I think the AFR/audit, they're kind of one and the same. One's a state report, one's our local auditors. The local auditors should be at our January work session. Timing-wise, they weren't ready for the December since they quick turnaround. For the January one, they'll be able to give like a nice 15-minute presentation to the board about our audited 23-24 year. February, we'll have the first look at budgets, and that'll very much kick that whole season off in February. Any other questions?
Thank you very much, Sean.
Yeah.
Any other business? Okay. Have a motion to adjourn?
I'm not about the second. So moved.
What I'm going to was, any kind